All right, thanks very much. So, hi everybody, I'm Jason. I work for Google, and we've got a great panel today, so let's just jump right in. So, this first question is from Margie. A few projects have already been awarded technology modernization funds. So, for the future, what are some pillars of a successful proposal and execution?
Well, one of the things that we wanted to make sure of that we did at the very outset was to set the criteria for the selection process, and it was predicated on a lot of research that we did with venture capital firms. So if you have limited resources and you're going to spend your next dollar, where would you spend it to have the most appropriate outcome? And what we came up with was a set of criteria that we've used for the board to be able to select from the multiple proposals that are coming in. And that includes the ability to actually make repayment, so there's got to be a solid ROI with a plan behind it. It includes having the right talent in place to execute. It includes a signature-based support mechanism from your most senior leadership so that we know that the senior leadership is behind it. And it is also a really good thing if you are addressing a cross-agency government priority, a problem that people have wrestled with. So for example, adopting cloud or adopting software as a service or moving off of a mainframe. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking for, because if somebody goes first, then of course others can follow in their footsteps with much more alacrity. And then finally, making sure that the funding mechanisms that are in place, that people are looking at how to use the working capital fund in an appropriate manner. So it's talent, it's technology, it's the approach, it's the cross-government impact, and then ultimately, what are the plans look like and the ability to repay. Because this is a different paradigm. It is about being able to constantly replenish that fund so that there are other projects coming down the line that can take advantage of it.
Awesome, thank you very much. So the next question is from Maria. You're a technology modernization board member. So conversely to Margie's question, what are some things project proposals should avoid when seeking TMF?
So we kept those questions very succinct and to the point for the agencies to answer. So don't tell us what your mission is. We already know who you are. That is one of the key points. You know, get to the point. Don't run on. You know, tell us what you want to do. As you're explain it, how's your partnership with your CFO if you need, or your acquisition folks, your senior procurement executives, if you need support from them? Do you have it all set up already? So don't just come in and say, oh, we want to do something. If you have the groundwork laid out and ready to go that says, you know, okay, we've already put a contract in place, or we've got things lined up to let a contract. We're looking for some of those things and some of the groundwork to be done, not just to come in and say, oh, we have a wish and we kind of want to do this. But we're looking for that plan. So being specific and explicit in that plan, the money, Margie already said about the money, how you're going to repay that back over time, and this is important. And if you're going to come in and say, I want, you know, $30 or $40 million, well, guess what? You just chewed up the first chunk of the fund. A big piece of that. Ask for it in pieces as well. How can you break it down into smaller chunks that says in 6 months we're going to do this, or in 4 months we're going to do this? Not, we have a plan to plan for 3 years. Well, guess what? The board, if we see a plan to plan, you're out of there. But being specific about it and laying out, say, this is what we want to accomplish and we're going to do it in X amount of time. So we're looking for those kind of things, but get to the point. That's really important. And the board is made up of members across the federal government with different experiences. People bring different things to the table. And we have some pretty lively debates and discussions about it. And as we're looking at them, we also want to know if, as you're bringing that in, we know that there's other agencies doing similar things. Did you reach out to your CIO peer at the other agency and ask, say, how are you doing this too? And maybe taking some of that learning as well.
Awesome, thank you very much. So next question for Max. Energy was one of the first awardees of TMF. So can you tell us about your project and some of the lessons that you learned in getting it approved and executed?
Sure, well, ours is about moving to email in the cloud, something we've done in small pockets around the department, but not as an enterprise before. And so really what we thought about, you know, just to boil it to sort of pithy stuff, is we thought about, having the end in mind at the beginning and counting the cost. And so what I mean is, we went through probably internally 6 or 7 different iterations of exactly scoping what we were going to finally present to the board. And I think that was important. What we tried to go back and do was make sure that we were very focused on exactly on a realistic outcome, on one that we were confident that we could execute on with the resources we had, one that was, I think, tangible and within the time frame, because that was really about managing the project risk of it. And we wanted to focus on where we knew we could get within that time frame. And then the cost part, again, as we talked about, the model for TMF is this idea that the way we should be doing IT projects and management across the government is really going and understanding our costs. And so on this particular project, because we had already moved, part of our email for our federal employees over to the cloud, we had a very good firsthand experience on exactly what those costs for the move would look like, as well as the cost savings. We also went back out and validated that with industry so that we understood what these costs were going to be, and we knew where we had cost savings, and I think we were able to demonstrate them. And I think that's one of the critical elements is, look, I've been around federal government a long time. Projects and contracts, the primary reasons they fail are not because they're too hard. It's not because of technology. It's because basically we make bad requirements or we move the yardsticks, right? And I say that both as in a Fed role, but I've also been as a contractor, and I've seen that repeatedly. And so we really tried to make sure, and again, one of the things that Maria was talking about, it was breaking it up into these pieces, breaking it up into segments so you actually understood where you're going. It gives the board and the department a chance to actually manage the project in the right way, right? So we don't get the end of it, we burn through all the money and we're only halfway there. That's what we do all the time in government. And so part of this is to try and start do a model of doing it the right way. And those are the pieces that we tried to put in place. And it took us a while, but it was a great process. One of the reasons that I invested and wanted to do that for the Department of Energy is that's how we should do every one of our IT projects. They should all look like that way. They should all have yardsticks. We should count the cost at the beginning of all of them. And frankly, I got great feedback even from my own team about just going through the process. I had some of the people that really liked going through the process because they got to really sit through and think about it and be strategic. And I think that was, aside from getting the money, which is certainly going to be a help, the process alone for my team, I think, was very valuable for us.
Awesome. So open question for everybody. I'm a big fan of the open data sets at data.gov, making data available and accessible. It's kind of what we're into at Google. So will any of the TMF projects either be, that are either approved or in the pipeline, do you think they'll be releasing any data sets to data.gov?
Well, one of the things I wanted to emphasize, I will answer that question. So I did hear your question, but I wanted to emphasize that we actually have data as a strategic asset as one of the major pillars of the President's management agenda. And we just finished closure on an open forum where people were asked to comment on the principles of what are going to be the common principles that we adhere to as we go through development of this data strategy, and it's a co-creation process, which is inclusive of data groups that are extended across the United States and are not just federally based. So one of the things that we do look for when we're looking for these modernization projects is that you understand your data sets and that you architect your use of that data appropriately so it can be most easily shared, and so that value can be derived from that data in multiple ways, both in the mission space, because it's very important that we understand internally how we use our data in order to make the most appropriate mission decisions and business decisions, but it's also appropriate that we understand what is most valuable to the innovators out in the greater data sector and the data analyst, the data scientist, and what they can derive from federally funded data, because we are sitting on a gold mine in terms of what we have available. I mean, just looking at what's available from some of the agencies we work very, very closely, HHS, Commerce, others, there are use cases that are being brought forward through this data strategy that we are going to actually incubate. We're going to provide a platform. We're going to choose some use cases, and we're going to incubate some of these approaches that people have either started and have gotten down the pathway and have sort of proven the concept, and we can build upon it, or it's something that we haven't seen before and we kind of want to test. So pilots are very important, and if we see something that comes across that shows that kind of thought in the TMF board, we are certainly going to give credence to that.
One of the things that the Federal CIO Council, the Innovation Committee, stood up was a sandbox, and this was really driven by the data folks that are across the federal government, the statisticians, the data scientists. Those folks are knee-deep in data who had a problem with, they want to be able to work together and collaborate with data, and they had nowhere to do it and no way to, they were transferring data around, and when you have huge data sets, that's not a good way to do it. So the Innovation Committee stood up a sandbox for those data folks to be able to take some of that data, whether it's open data, and generally it is, but to be able to do something with it and work together on projects and experiment on the things they could do with data. And to Margie's point, continuing to dig in on that data, there's a huge amount of opportunity, and those data people really know. Those are the ones that are really smart, those communities of practices within the agencies. They're the ones who want to work together and bring those data sets together and try things and say, oh, cool, look what we can do. So it's not just industry and the public and making the data available, but internally, even within the government, there's a want, and people really want to collaborate and be able to do some cool things with the data.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a capability perspective, a lot of us, well, certainly our department as an enterprise, we're still on the front end of putting all the data in a place where we have a better visibility of it across our enterprise. I think that's probably common across federal government. So I think you will start to see more projects that move in that direction to try and extract the value out of it. I think the PMA is going to be really a big driver, right? It's one thing to put data out there, but that's got to be prioritized. We need to be doing customer service, right? And our customers are, both, whether it's private industry or taxpayers, we have a huge amount of data across government. What's the most valuable data that we can give them? What's the data we can give taxpayers to keep accountability and understanding what government does, as well as the data that we can start to feed that helps industry? And we have a lot of good examples of that across, in sort of pockets of excellence across different agencies right now. But most agencies probably have something that could be feeding industry and other folks who could think of new ways to do it, to use it, that we have not thought of. And so I think the PMA is going to be able to help push that prioritization of what data we need to get out there more quickly.
Interesting. So we are almost out of time. Just in the time remaining for everybody here, what are some key takeaways that you'd like attendees to walk away with regarding what we've talked about today?
I would like people to walk away understanding that this has been an incredible journey, and we are thankful for the support of the administration and the support of Congress in a bipartisan manner for the change that we're trying to create. And the mechanisms that we're putting in place, the technology platforms, the acquisition approaches, the financial flexibility models, and ultimately the talent that we're trying to bring to the federal government, either through contracting or through hiring, is incredibly important. All of those pillars have to be in place for this to be successful, but we're more than that, and more than choosing individual projects. We are changing the culture of the way that we choose investments and the manner in which we work with Congress to actually provide the funding for that. And the transparency and the visibility and the ability to show success here is one of the things that I'm most proud to be a part of.
I think over time you're going to see more, even as agencies and departments are continuing to modernize internally. I think over time we're setting the stage, whether it's the TMF board, the administration, what Margie's talking about, those things are for more cross-agency collaboration and really getting to that, the federal government acting as an enterprise rather than individual. So even if you look back over time and you continue to look forward, you're going to see more and more of that cross-agency collaboration where there's touch points across federal agencies, and they're going to have to work together. Where they have some in the past, it's going to make it a whole lot more efficient and a whole lot better for the public. And ultimately, that's who we're serving.
Yeah, and I would second, especially the cross-agency. I mean, Maria's folks have actually been a huge help to us, even as we were talking through some of the work we were doing on the cloud and our proposal. When I speak at these, I like to encourage my fellow departments to be a part of the TMF process. I think some of them feel like the process looks like this. They bring you in a dark room with bright lights in your eyes, and Maria and the board grill you, and that's not what the process looks
I
like.
thought we did.
Well, you grilled me a little, but the process actually was incredibly collaborative with GSA and OMB. I mean, their folks literally could not have been more encouraging and helpful to my team as we put that process together. And I don't always say that about OMB, but I have to say that their team from top to bottom and the GSA folks were great to work with. They took all our feedback. They gave us really valuable, helpful feedback throughout the process. But the reality is this is the way we should be managing IT across federal government. And even just the cultural change of going through this process, I think is enormously helpful. So I've made this threat before, but if other agencies aren't going to go after the rest of that money, I am. And so I think people really need to be looking at that, but this is how we should be running IT in the government. And so I think that's helpful. And as we go through modernization, again, we have these pockets of sort of excellence in places where people are doing well. We're trying to sort of stitch those together so that they're not tactical wins, but strategic wins. That's what we're doing as a department. That's what we're trying to do, I think, as a federal enterprise. We've got a lot of work to do there, but we have, again, we have tremendous opportunity. We've got, industry partners who are doing this for some of the most advanced companies in the world, who can come in and help us with this process. So we've got just a huge amount of opportunity. And again, I've been around DC for 17 years. This has, I think, been the most forward-leaning and encouraging time for people working in federal technologies I've seen, because there is such investment in it on a bipartisan basis. I think we provide an opportunity to move government forward in an effective, efficient manner that you just don't see in a lot of other areas right now. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We're out of time. Really great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.